Vegan activists target Canadian farmers. I'm Marco Perri. Welcome to the Perri platform. Activists have taken to new methods to try and get their message across. According to the National Post, cyberbullying by vegan activists is a growing source of stress for farmers and agricultural producers who already face significant mental health challenges linked to their job. Think about that. It doesn't make sense. Canadian farmers have it pretty bad right now. You've got China destroying export markets, and now you gotta deal with vegan activists trying to attack you for doing your job. If your farm product has not been already decimated by China, well, it's on the chopping block, and that psychological factor definitely plays a part on your psyche. Look at the canola industry, for example. China made up a massive customer base, and suddenly, they stopped buying. Now, just pretend you're a businessman taking home about $100,000 a year. Your top customer pulls out because they have an issue with your board of directors or something like that. That same top customer may have represented over 40% of your sales. So, that puts you in a stressful situation as you try to make up the market somehow. That example is pretty much what happened with China and the canola industry, and farmers are scrambling to try and make up those lost sales. That's one reason why you should always try to diversify your customer base. It all comes down to bargaining power. If one source makes up a massive share of your sales, they can effectively control and they have the power to destroy you. Not something you want to give to a customer. That speaks to the mental health situation of farmers right now, always wondering what foreign powers will do to affect their export sales, and at the same time, those export sales are tied to their livelihood and their abilities to provide for their family. In a sense, they're almost powerless and they just have to take what the market gives them. Not the most comforting feeling. There's also a growing lack of gratitude for the profession as a whole, as we see from the vegan activists. Farmers provide food for people. They enable you to live. Otherwise, you personally would need to spend maybe 8 hours a day plowing a field and gathering crops. They do it for us and they get paid. It's a pretty fair arrangement, I would say. As time went on though, less and less farmers were needed due to technology, but today, we still need them in some capacity. It's not like we can get rid of all the farmers and things will just be peachy. Quite the opposite. So Maylene Biggin, a Canadian farmer, describes herself as the victim of bullying from vegan activists. Biggin recently changed the settings on her social media accounts after having to get up an hour early to delete more than 100 negative messages a day, some of which made her fear for her safety, she says. On a side note, from what I've seen and heard, she herself engaged with the hecklers and said some anti-vegan rhetoric, but there is a difference between posting broad sentiments versus being personally attacked with over 100 messages a day. That's a clear distinction there, and it kind of sucks that she has to supposedly wake up an hour early before her farming duties just to clear those messages away. What kind of hate messages did she receive? They range from activists taking screenshots of her photos and editing them with knives in her face and writing psychopath across her forehead. Pretty ironic, as I would wager you would need to be pretty psychotic yourself to go that far with attacking somebody publicly. That's just not a normal avenue for someone to vent their frustrations, and you can see why the farmer may have felt threatened. Having knives drawn onto your face, not the nicest thing. She said some of the messages compared artificial insemination of cows to rape. That's a pretty foolish stance for the activists to try and play on, and others use words such as kidnapping and murder to describe the work of cattle breeders. As you can see, the activists are pushing extremes and applying heinous labels where they do not necessarily belong. They are purposely using charged language to get people all riled up about it. Are the conditions for farm animals amazing? No. Are farmers raping cows, as they've so wonderfully put it? No. There has to be a balance here, and sacrificing logical statements for ones that are going to rile people up, it's dishonest and not the best way to get your agenda across. It's almost propaganda, you could argue. The farmer puts out a quote, "The population has become disconnected from agriculture. We all have a grandfather who did it, but today, in the eyes of many people, we are rapists and poisoners, and that's what hurts me the most. So I do think people are disconnected from agriculture, as I stated in the beginning. Without it, those activists wouldn't even be able to be activists. They'd have to change their way of life centered around creating their own food. It's an advantage that is easily taken for granted. The second part though, well, actually in the first part, maybe not everyone had a grandfather who was a farmer. I would say that timeline stretches way, way back. But the second point I want to address, in the eyes of many people, we are rapists and poisoners. I don't think many people truly view farmers in that way. Only a small pocket of dedicated, disillusioned, extremist vegans will go that far. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the whole rapist thing. It literally makes no sense. They may be blissfully unaware of what the word means, or they're just trying to rile people up using the most heinous names they can conjure. The article then moves on to someone called Perri, a psychologist who works in the agricultural sector. She says bullying on the part of hardcore vegan activists on social media is a new source of stress for a growing number of farmers. Personally, I don't think farmers need to face any more stress, especially from wild activists. This really is getting silly. Unfortunately though, it is happening, and it is stretching beyond the farmers into their families. The psychologist says, at school, the children of farmers start to be bullied and treated badly as children of polluters, or the kids repeat what they see on social media and say things like, these guys are raping cows and artificially inseminating, whatever. They're basically using the rhetoric spewed out by the activists in a way to sort of make a meme of it and make kids feel bad for their parents' profession. Once again, what is this nonsense about raping cows? It keeps coming up. It's really a joke now, and it's a meme. Is that the platform these activists want to be upholding? I might understand these school kids coming up with that and saying it, but the idea originally was conceptualized by the activists supposedly. Grown adults, and they're saying nonsense like that. These guys have a pretty good comeback though, the children of the farmers. If someone is picking on them for having farmers as parents, all they really need to say is that without us, you would starve. You'd be dead. Or you'd be working the fields like the good old days. So you're welcome for being allowed to go to school and enjoy your life. This is another example of the disconnect. On a serious note though, that's pretty sad. The kids are innocent members in all of this, and they should be left alone. Shouldn't be dragged in to the activist rhetoric. These activists have produced a toxic environment where everyone is being dragged through the mud and experiencing the fallout. How would they like it if it was their kids who were being made fun of for having idiotic parents? Not good, I would assume. To them, it isn't a laughing matter though. They have identified an enemy and reduced the farmers to subhuman in their minds. All acts of evil are justified as long as they can vanquish the threat. This appears to be a common thinking shared among more vocal activists of a variety of causes. There is no room for logical discussion because they have already made up their minds. There is no room for compromise because they cannot negotiate with supposed demons. The only answer is total authoritarian censorship or annihilation. This is the sign of the times. They have fled from fact and used exaggeration to their benefit. The ironic thing is these activists are looking more and more like a hate group. I see very little difference in terms of methodology. There is also a fundamental rule here about conflict that they seem to be ignoring. How likely do you think it is for someone to change their mind or try to see things your way if you demonize and attack them? It's not likely because you made it highly personal and no longer about discussion. There are issues with farming, of course, but instead of making bogus claims and trying to ruin people's lives, why not focus on healthy methods like showing these farmers a better path forward, using data and facts and appealing to their logical side, helping them come up with a solution? That's really what activists are for. This group here is simply an abomination, and it has to be said. Let's say these people had their way, hypothetically, and farming ceased to exist. It would be a utopia, right? At least in their imagination. In reality, it'd be quite the opposite. A lot of people would be in trouble. It does not take a vivid imagination to conceptualize the aftermath of such a result. Maybe the extremist vegans would be okay, temporarily, because they've trained themselves to live without animal products, but the vast majority of the world would be out of luck. Then, when the majority of the world is out of luck, the vegans will also find themselves out of luck as everyone converts to veganism so they can survive. Say hello to world famine and massive food shortages. The way these people think is asinine. Me personally, I support encouraging a more veggie-based diet, but slowly, systematically, and logically. What these people seemingly are looking for is instant gratification, and they're unwittingly trying to bring about an apocalypse. They have no idea what their actions are doing, and they're just fueled off emotion, rage, and hate for these farmers. To me, they're a hate group, and their actions prove that. It has quite literally crossed over into bullying. It's no longer about having a disagreement and trying to argue and prove that your ideas are better logically. It's about trashing the opponent and making them hate themselves so they seemingly want to conform to this ideal of society. It's a bad recipe, and it's not what a democracy should be about. I hope that by shining some light on this story, the farmers can find some more supporters and these vegan activists tone it down a little bit because they are way out of line right now. So that's about it for today. Thanks for joining me on the Perri platform. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to leave a review and follow me on Twitter at Perri Platform. I'll see you soon.